Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Delusions of Grandeur. I'm one of your hosts, and my name is David Stregi, and here in the room, I have Boris. Welcome back, Boris.
Thank you. Hi.
Today, we are going to go backwards in time to pre-code Hollywood, where we are going to be discussing a film that supposedly has certain elements of a film that we have already talked about, called
Oh, it did.
called The 10 Little Indians, which is based on an Agatha Christie novel. So let us go back to 1934, where we have a written story by Owen Davis, which is based on a book by Gwen Bristow, and it's called The Ninth Guest.
Uh,
Before we go any further, let us begin here by giving a little bit of an intro to this movie.
okay.
So IMDb says here that 8 strangers are invited to spend the night in a penthouse apartment. Although on this bootleg that I have here, it says an opulent mansion.
Yeah, that's not quite what it was.
After being wined and dined, a voice on the radio informs them that they will be murdered unless they manage to outwit the ninth guest, death.
Uh,
Why don't you tell me, was this a first time watch for you?
no, today I watched it for the first time, but yeah, I was going to say well, at least the basic idea of the movie is really very similar to the movie, and then there were none which we discussed a while ago.
Okay. And what were your thoughts on the ninth guest? Did you enjoy it?
Yes, yes, I enjoyed it, and I also read a bit about it online, and I saw a lot of people compare it to, and then there were none, and I actually don't know if there is any connection. I know this movie was made before Agatha Christie's novel, so I don't know. Someone said online that Agatha Christie's novel was actually inspired by this movie. I don't know if it really was, or is the similarity maybe coincidental. Do you maybe know?
Well, I like to believe that it was inspired because I don't think that Agatha Christie, if she intentionally decided to copy similar elements in this story with her particular tale of murder. um, but there are definitely a lot of similarities. Don't you agree?
Indeed, there are a lot of similarities, although in Agatha Christie's story, well, I didn't read the novel, I only watched the movie, but in the novel it's probably the same. They did introduce one concept, one very clever plot twist that we didn't have in this movie. So, in spite of similarities, there are still some pretty significant differences between the two.
Indeed. So, in the very beginning of this film, we have what I believe the United States had as a way of communicating, which was a little bit different than you've probably seen. What what they used to use for telephones and whatnot were called telegraph rooms, which often did Morse code, and they spoke into these um, telephones, and then got wires, sometimes Morse coded to them, or they heard them on the switchboard, which was often this gigantic, like, electronic board where they were connected to. But in here, it was a little different because these girls who were taking the messages, they were typing on typewriters, and it seemed like they were speaking into these phones. And I wasn't sure if they had earphones or whatnot on, but one of the girls said that she listened to the message that she wrote down for 8 people to be addressed to sounded creepy as all hell. So that is kind of like the setup for this movie, where we see each of these telegraph letters show up at these different people's places, inviting them to a party at an apartment place.
Yeah.
What did you think about that beginning sequence there, where we're kind of somewhat nonchalantly introduced to the different party guests?
Well, the part with the telegraph, I have to say, at first I was a little confused about it since it's a very old way of communication that I'm not really familiar with from the real life. So, but
It was
otherwise,
it was definitely before our time.
yeah.
Although Morse code was used on the SMS Titanic when it sunk. I know that it's not that far off from the sinking of the Titanic. Actually, let's see. This was 1934. The sinking of the Titanic, I believe, happened in 1917. So it wasn't that far off. It was like maybe a little less than 15 years. So
Yeah.
communication had not really changed all that much. The telephones kind of look like small megaphones.
Indeed.
And seemed like some messages were um, taken by stenography, which if you ever go to court and see something in your government where right I mean now they use computers, but they used to use typewriters to type the script or dialogue that is used in courtrooms. They keep archives of certain things that way, but whereas computers would have taken the place of these nowadays.
Indeed.
So there are a few
Yeah.
characters here. Apparently, Jason Osgood, played by Edwin Maxwell, which I swear that I've seen him before this film in
Ooh.
other films. I might have. Let's see, Osgood.
Ooh.
Oh, he's been in The Shop Around the Corner, His Girl Friday. He was in the original Scarface. He was in Mystery of the Wax Museum. So he's been in quite a few movies that I have actually seen. I know you may not have, but
Yeah, I haven't, but I think you've mentioned some of these titles before, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly.
The Mystery of the Wax Museum was one of the first movies to ever have a wax museum
Oh,
in it, if I remember correctly. The Shop Around the Corner, well, that's one of the films that they believe inspired You've Got Mail, uh, I believe. With
oh,
Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, I think, somewhat. But in any case, here we have a select cast of like 8 people who've never really been around each other. Um, we have, let's see, who do we have? We have Mr. Jim Daly, who is in charge of, or at least is a writer for a newspaper. Uh,
yes.
we have Jean Trent, who is played by Genevieve Tobin. Um, and she seems to be kind of a society, kind of a darling. And apparently, she has some kind of a relationship as being with Mr. Jim Daly. They seem to have a past relationship between each other.
Yes.
Mr. Henry Abbott, who has been recently kicked out of a university. Uh, Tim Cronin, played by Edward Ellis, who I think, was in charge of kicking him out, may have. Jason Osgood was one of the characters, which apparently he's a politician of some sort. And evidently he was helping a person run for office who evidently had a criminal background, which I
uh,
believe he was a Mr. Burke.
yeah, that was this guy we saw at the beginning, I
Yeah.
think. Uh,
Apparently, one of the newspaper women, who I believe her name was Sylvia Ingsby. Yeah, Sylvia Inglesby was the person who found out those goods to help the other guy. Who was it? Who was he? That Dr. Ray Reed, either Dr. Murray Reed or Tim Cronin. I think Cronin was the guy that evidently she had feelings for, except he left her some money in his will, which we find out later on.
uh, uh,
What do you think about the characters once they begin to arrive?
well, we find out about some of them more than about some others, and some of them were pretty interesting. Like this guy, Jason Osgood, who is the first one to, well, spoiler alert, the
Mm-hmm.
first one to get killed. Actually, although he has the shortest time on screen, we can actually see the kind of person he is. I mean, we see him try to bribe the host into letting him go by both with money and by trying to kill other people. So it pretty much proves the host's point that the first person who will get killed is the one who the least deserves to live. uh,
Oh yeah. So as we know, once these People are invited to the party. Eventually, the butler that is involved in this whole thing, Hawkins, who is played by Sidney Bracy, a very staunch, very proud butler, as we learn, because there is a bumbling butler that comes along that's late for his job,
Yeah.
who ends up becoming a drunk in a sense. He's kind of like a fool in this story.
Yeah.
So we have an interesting cast of characters. One woman, Margaret Chisholm, is a society
Uh,
lady of some prestige, because apparently her daughter is supposed to be married to one of the guests' daughters in the room. Well, we also find out that she di- actually went under a different name at one point in time with her first husband, which everyone here supposedly has a secret that they are keeping from each other.
yeah. Yeah, about Margaret, we found out, if I remember correctly, that she had her husband institutionalized in order to keep his wealth, and everyone thought he was dead or something like that, if I understood correctly.
And some of this information came out little bit by little bit.
Yeah.
But eventually everything came to a head when it seems that Jim Daly outwits uh, who we thought was Henry Abbott in the end. But before we get to that, why don't we talk about the apartment itself? What did you think about the apartment? I mean, it seemed like quite a place, huh?
Well, yeah, the location was actually pretty nice. I have noticed in this kind of movies we have recently watched, they are usually set in some pretty cool looking place, like this apartment or some supposedly haunted houses in the previous movies we discussed. It looked pretty good, yeah.
Yeah. So there's this door that slides open for the guests to come in, but before the door opens, there's a gate that people come through, and
Uh,
this gate is also what's keeping them from leaving. Why?
because uh, after they all entered, the mysterious host got it electrified so that if anyone tried to leave, they would get electrocuted.
Also, supposedly, if anyone touched the radio in which the host was speaking from, what would
Uh,
happen?
well, the same thing. The radio was also said to be charged with electricity, although from what I remember, we didn't actually see anyone touch the radio and see what was said was true or not. But
Nope. So I think that was actually kind of a bluff.
oh,
I almost think because no one did touch it. To I think people were afraid. And at this point in time, as early as this was, people would believe. And this was a very elaborate setup for as early as this was.
oh, well, indeed. it kind of made me wonder if someone actually tried to do something like that in real life, like would they really be so good to at predicting every move of their guests in such detail, like
Exactly.
uh,
I mean, uh, he was actually, even though he was kind of a creep, he did seem like he was two steps ahead of everyone. And I mean, who would have thought that he could have predicted the death of the one guy, or predicted that the one newspaper woman was going to accidentally shoot the one that she loved.
yeah, yeah, uh, I was really surprised by the fact that he predicted that Jason would be the first one to die, and he even predicted how it would happen and at what time, and
Mhm.
then Margaret and so on.
Well, Margaret took her own life.
uh, yeah, well, Jason kind of did too, although unknowingly.
Yeah. So, what did you think of the character of Jason Osgood? Did you particularly like him?
Uh, well, not quite. I was just intrigued by the fact that we actually get to know his personality pretty well, in spite of the fact that he has a very short time on screen. But
Well, he obviously believed in the wrong man for. Evidently, he was a political backer, which is probably a man who probably had money in order to support a politician, which, as we found out, was Burke, who had that criminal history. And as we well know, whenever it comes to a president in the United States, if they have any kind of a criminal background, we don't really want them for our president, really.
yeah.
But I don't know. To me, I kind of liked him, and then again, I kind of didn't. He kind of reminded me of a character like Edward G. Robinson, just a little bit. And I'm not sure if you know that actor as much.
uh, I think I don't know him. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I can introduce you to him later on.
Okay.
um, One of the most notable ones that I remember being in was, I think, the Ten Commandments. Yeah,
Oh,
the Ten Commandments, which was with Charlton Heston in it. But
I think I haven't seen that one.
movies were quite long back then, and I do believe that in the Ten Commandments, Vincent Price was also there. So in that particular film, which was a different role for him. I don't think people were expecting him to be in a biblical film.
uh,
But
yeah.
in any case, what did you think about the character of Miss Jean Trent?
Phew. Well, actually, she seemed to be one of the nicer ones. Actually, in the end, I didn't even understand what she was accused of. What did she supposedly do?
She was just there so that Mr. Abbott, or AKA Mr. Vickers would have someone to love in the end, and it was the only way that he could think of to acquire that love.
Oh, yeah. So, well, I thought I might have missed something because, as you know, since English is not my first language, I sometimes struggle to distinguish dialogue lines in the spoken language, and in this one, I wasn't quite able to distinguish everything, so I thought I might have missed something. So. It turns out Gene didn't actually have any criminal past, right?
I don't think so. Not really. I mean, the only things he had was an accusatory tone and thought process that Mr. Jim Daly um, had a situation that he could, in fact, if he wanted to murder her or want her to die for some reason. Because if she died in any way, shape, or form, he would inherit the ancestral home that apparently they both had acquired, and it just so happened that Jim Daly actually supposedly loves her and will always love her. So
Uh,
although she mistrusted him at first, so
uh,
I guess you have kind of a love triangle here with Henry Abbott and Jim Daly and Gene Trent. And
yeah.
sometimes you have the two men that love the one woman.
Yeah, it usually happens that way, not the other way.
Oh, you mean where one man loves two women?
Yeah, well, that can also happen, but this seems to be more common, at least in movies and TV shows and so on.
It does seem to be kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But what did you think about this love triangle? Do you think that it was never going to be, that it was always going to be one man over the other?
Well, actually, I didn't know how it was going to end since this is one of those movies where everyone could get killed, and it was also possible that all the three of them end up getting killed. Well, fortunately, it didn't happen, but yeah, I had no idea how it was going to end, but it ended well, in my opinion.
You know what I liked? I liked the fact that we found out that he found out that chair that he was sitting in was had like all these buttons that had all these recordings, and well, or at least had a way to be set up to play the recordings on these records. That apparently these buttons, whenever you push them, it fetched whatever record the recording was on. Uh, uh, uh,
Y-
did you see that phonograph actually held up in the air a record each,
yeah, yeah.
and it seemed like every time a button was pushed, it retrieved another record.
Indeed.
It was
Actually,
intricate looking phonograph.
yeah, when I saw it, I was actually surprised by the fact that something like that was even possible at that time.
They used to. There were many different kinds of phonographs patented and created, and some of them were quite heavy and quite elaborate in their making. I mean, the phonograph used to be the most popular way to play music and radio recordings. So, and it has survived even to this day. So,
Ooh.
at least the vinyl records have, not the heavy records that you may have once seen. The one
Yeah.
more like glass. If you dropped it, you broke it.
Ooh.
There and I've come across some of those in the past where if you smashed it, it would break like pottery.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wouldn't do anything like that.
Well, I was getting rid of some older music records from my high school at one point in time, and he was getting rid of them. I had a record at that point in time, a record player, so I took some of them home, but I ended up breaking one along the way, and I remember it breaking into like millions of pieces. I was like, oh shit. But
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
but um, it was symphony music. Um, so it was different having it on that kind of um, platform to listen to. So, but in any case, what did you think about the cook and the butler and the assistant who was late?
Well, actually, we didn't get to know much about them from what I remember, but some scenes with them were quite funny, like the one with this giant ice cube.
Well, evidently he was possibly trying to cool down the stove from dinner, quite possibly,
Oh,
which is why he put the ice cube in the in the oven.
phew, makes sense, yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that behind all of that shit was a door to the wine cellar or wine closet or whatnot, and that's where the butler and the cook were evidently drugged and tied and put over in that area. Probably try to save them from the other guests because they thought that those people were in on it.
Yeah.
So I guess dude had some kind of a heart.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I guess the Mister the Mister Abbott had some kind of a heart.
Uh, well, yeah.
To save those characters from scrutiny from the other guests.
Uh, yeah, and one interesting thing I noticed was in the end when they discovered that he was behind the whole thing, he apparently tried to kill himself because he said at the beginning that if they discovered him, that he would die in front of them. So apparently, in order to keep his word, he tried to kill himself, but it was interesting to realize that if he had killed himself at that moment, then those who remained inside the house, they would have remained trapped there, and they wouldn't be able to find their way out, which likely means they would have starved to death.
And what do you think about his plan for revenge? Do you feel for Mr. Abbott uh, in the sense that okay, do you feel like um, an injustice was done upon his family so much that he had to, you know, get all these people in the same room just to enact justice, since justice probably hadn't availed in public?
Well, to an extent, I did feel sorry for him, although, on the other hand, not everyone was directly to blame for what happened to him, and he also put in jeopardy the woman he supposedly loved. So, I think what happened to him in the end was a deserved punishment after all.
Oh, for him, because technically you should not be the one to play God.
Well, partly that, but also, like I said, he also put at risk the life of some people who didn't really do him so much wrong, like Jean, who he was supposedly in love with, yet.
Yeah, when you love someone, you don't put them in danger, do you?
Uh, yeah, that was my point.
So, I mean, I guess I myself kind of feel for Mr. Abbott because I understand that back in this day, if someone brought your family shame to your name, I mean that was his brother that she supposedly had married and put up in the insane asylum.
Oh, oh, yeah, yeah.
Uh, so, in order to step into the limelight and be a society figure, Margaret Chisholm committed her husband at the time, who was Mr. Vickers. And she, in fact, was never divorced. She claimed that he was dead. Well, of course, she was dead to him, or dead to her, as far as she was concerned. But,
Yeah.
I mean, I do believe that some of the people that were there did not necessarily deserve death, but deserve some kind of a justice coming to them. Obviously, there was something that they were all kind of involved in. We found out that Jim Daly made his first successful story based on this whole tale when it first came out. So that was interesting how they connected all of them in the end.
Mm,
They were all kind of complete strangers to each other.
yeah. Well, Jim was actually a pretty interesting character. One thing I paid attention to was that throughout the movie he told everyone multiple times to just sit down all together and stay calm. And if no one does anything, then the killer cannot really get them. And he kind of had a point. If they had listened to him, then the killer wouldn't really have been able to do much. But yeah, the killer actually knew them well enough to know that they wouldn't just stay calm and do nothing, and he used that knowledge against them.
One thing I noticed whenever the women arrived to the party um, is how god awful ugly their dresses were. Uh, I'm sorry, but that was like a fashion statement of some sort. Those were I wouldn't get caught dead in those dresses, to be honest. Not a single one of them. I mean, the one that Miss Jean Trent was wearing, that was like so shiny and ugly, and ugh, I wouldn't even find my woman attractive in any of these dresses. God, the shoulders. I mean, there was something about. Uh, did they want the females to be like football players or something like that? I mean, because they put quite like elaborate shoulder stuff on their dresses.
Wow.
I mean, I wouldn't sashay myself if I were a female in those kind of dresses. That must have been a style of the time, but God, I wouldn't if I were one of those people who did photo shoots. I would never stick a woman in any of these dresses to walk them down any aisle.
Uh, I understand. Yeah, I paid attention to Jean's dress, like it really was very glittery when she appeared, and when I saw it, I wondered if it was possibly going to be a part of the plot, like if there was any reason why she was dressed like that.
Yeah, I I was not a fan of the wardrobe, at least of the women. But the men actually didn't look too bad. They looked snazzy in their suits. So, but then men have always been simple. If you put something snazzy on a man, then I don't know, that to me is kind of offensive. But in any case, what did you think about the movie as a whole? Did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it, and like I said before, it contains many similarities to, and then there were none. But like I said, both movies are worth seeing because they have at least different plot twists at the end.
Yeah, I agree.
Uh,
That's why I think both are unique and entertaining, and I'm glad that I was able to get a somewhat decent copy of it, so that we could see it at least. It looks definitely better than the YouTube copy that was up there. That one looked kind of funny.
uh, well, yeah.
But in any case, yeah. Here is my copy that I've found. Evidently, somebody made sure that the thing looked decent enough, and it wasn't just some uh, like printed paper. It actually seems like somebody actually printed this out in some fashion, uh,
Oh,
like actually on some kind of a label printing program or something like that. Which I've got a couple of those from Memorex that I still have to eventually test out once I get a printer. But yeah, this is my copy of The Ninth Guest. It is not out there legally, but according to this, Real Vault package design and summary, and it says 2015 Vault, all rights reserved. So according to this, it could very well be looking like it's a legit copy, but it's not.
Well, yeah, I if you didn't say it, I wouldn't really know.
But in any case, um, did you have a favorite scene from the film?
Hmm.
Might like.
uh, Well, there were a few things I found pretty memorable, like uh, the ending was interesting when Henry Abbott tried to kill himself, but Jim stopped him because he realized that Henry had to let them out first, because if Henry had killed himself at that moment, then Jim and Jean wouldn't have been able to leave the place. So that was a pretty interesting moment. And also, I found the effects with the electrified gate pretty well done. When this woman Sylvia ran into the gate and got herself killed, that was pretty well done and pretty impacting. Her scream was very realistic.
I happen to agree. I guess my first um when the radio host first began speaking is my favorite moment. And then, of course, I don't know why, but when the one woman she shoots her lover and then runs out to the gate and gets electrified.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I mean.
But the thing that I agree with is I like the special effects of the electrified fence that's
Yeah,
that gate. So I happen to enjoy that piece of the film as well. I think that was the best, the most unique part of this film, because I don't remember many murder mysteries that have to do with electricity. You know what I mean?
oh, yeah, good point.
So I mean, it's not the uh, this one and the Ten Little Indians. Those are murder mystery kind of films, and so have Haunted Honeymoon. Uh, a few
Uh,
others. So this film was entertaining.
it was, yeah.
In any case, it, let's see. Did you enjoy the music of the film at any given point in time?
Well, actually, since this was the first time I watched the movie, I was more focused on the plot itself, so I actually didn't pay much attention to the music this time.
It's okay. Apparently, the musical director was Louis Silvers, who lived from about 1889 to 1954, and he was behind such movies as One Night of Love in 1934, In Old Chicago, 1938. It Happened One Night with Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert, which, if I remember correctly, in 1934, that actually won an Oscar um,
Oh, cool.
or two. Swanee River in 1939, and so on and so forth. So, Phantom Valley, Sport of Kings, Out of the Depths, I Love a Mystery. I didn't know that there was a movie based on the show. I'll have to check that out.
Cool. Cool.
I Love a Mystery was a radio show at one point in time. I'll have to see if I can find that movie. Wouldn't mind checking that out. But in any case, did you have anything else that you wanted to discuss about this film?
Oh, let me think. Uh, well, I'm not sure. Maybe there was something else I wanted to mention, but I can't remember right now.
Alrighty. Well, I think that's all the time that we have for today, folks. So thank you for listening in. If you have, definitely check the film out if you have not. It was filmed in 1934. And I love black and white films. I love revisiting some films from back in the day. So when you get a chance, check the film out in your own element. And I think the film is entertaining. So
It is, yeah.
I mean, it's got its slow moments because there are moments where the film just kind of stops for a couple of moments. But if you can get over that, it's fairly entertaining. It's, I mean, I wish it were a little bit more fast paced. I mean,
Cool.
but for the most part, it keeps you on your edge and on the edge of your seat because you don't know what's going to happen next. So, and
Yeah, that much is true.
if you get an invitation to a party, just make sure that you have a way to get out. And any
Yeah, that's one thing not many people would have on their minds unless they have seen movies like this one.
indeed. Good night and good afternoon, everyone. Have a good afternoon wherever you are, and enjoy.
Yeah, good afternoon.